talking about complicated systems that rely on other complicated systems to run. So when you have that level of connectivity, the human being is kind of shut out from it. As a customer, absolutely. But even as a maintainer, even as a administrator, you're probably going to be looking at an AI to scan to make sure that the code, that there's not a problem in your subsystems.
And you mentioned in our first talk about like how phones and cars have already become impossible for us to repair.
Yeah.
Is that relationship, does that also carry to smart cities?
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about networked cities, you're talking about new infrastructure. And if you're talking about new infrastructure, you're talking about new technology that most people don't have the training or access to mess around with. And there's not maybe a lot of crossover. I mean, I guess it used to be if you were good at fixing bicycles, you could fix your sewing machine. And if you're good at sewing leather, you could sew fabric. Like there's some crossover between your skill sets. You know, electrical engineering and computer coding at high levels where you want to make sure that your gas line runs properly or your flying cars is properly tuned. You don't, and are you going to be a radar expert, and ducted fan expert, aerodynamics, and the rest? I mean, you're talking about complicated systems that rely on other complicated systems to run. So when you have that level of connectivity, the human being is kind of shut out from it. As a customer, absolutely. But even as a maintainer, even as a administrator, you're probably going to be looking at an AI to scan to make sure that the code, that there's not a problem in your subsystems, because there's so many subsystems, you can't keep an eye on all of them. So a red flag pops up and then you can see it. So there's a way to manage complexity, but that way is not, distributed to the people that use it. And it's really not even distributed to the people who are flying it or operating it, or the quote unquote professionals being paid to use it. It's going to be as much magic to them as it is to us. It's like the pilot's not really going to know how to fly the plane, Why have a pilot?
So are you like, what is your like take on smart city? Are you hopeful about what they could produce? Is it hype? Is it?
There are areas of smart tech that I'm very hopeful about. I think wearable electronics for medical monitoring, for example, is pretty good. I think there's a lot of implants, things that you can do on that level too. Things getting smaller, sensors getting smaller. No one likes getting a scope rammed into one of their orifices. So, there's a market for that. People will be willing to take a risk on an implantable device if it means that they don't have to get rotor-rooted. So I'm hopeful about stuff like that. I'm less hopeful for at advertising, that kind of thing. But, because it'll be more pervasive than ever. At the end of the day, if we choose to adopt it, is kind of up to us. I mean, I always remember the Meta goggles and the VR push, and just it just went nowhere. So there's some things that are going to be on the front level that consumers will have some control over, but the truth of it, it's going to be more like smartphones, and if you don't have one, you're left behind. It's going to get, that trend will probably increase. How much that matters depends on how much you care about, a digital divide, that concept, or even other parts of the world. If we're consuming things faster, news faster, data faster, what does that do to places that are slower? There's always the turbulent boundary between the fast and slow moving. What does that look like? That you can devise a positive or negative for everything. Telehealth, telemedicine, wearable implant, that could save Africa, right? I mean, or it can, you know, become Pepsi's worst marketing campaign ever. Like, it's just going to be a tool.